WELSTech is a bi-weekly podcast exploring the intersections of technology and ministry. It is part of the podcast network sponsored by WELS, the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod. Our show today is hosted by Martin Spriggs and Sally Draper. Welcome back, everybody, to WELSTech. This is episode 699, or 700 minus 1, January 26th. No, January 25th, 2023. Lots of numbers new numbers that I have to remember here. I'm Martin Spriggs. Show about technology and ministry is what you've joined here. Hopefully you're in the right place. And joining me in that place each and every time we do this, or for most of those 699s, is Sally Draper. Hey, Sally.
Hey, Martin, I'm ready to party like it's 699. How's that for a great lead in?
Or 700 minus 1. Yeah.
700 minus 1.
Yeah, it was good to see you last week.
Excited to record with you last week at the WELS National Conference on Lutheran Leadership. What a treat it was to be there and to absorb a lot of information. And I'm happy to be back in this seat and hopefully carrying out some of those new ideas that I learned. Lots
of conversations there. And we decided that this show we needed to add more people. So you have 5 squares on the board today. By no means am I calling each and every one of them square. In fact, quite the opposite. They are 2 of them you've seen many times before, our semi-regular classroom technology correspondents, Rachel Feld and Jason Schmidt. Hey, Rachel, how are you today?
Muted is how she is.
Oh, that's $1.
Mike, she's like, yeah, I don't know.
Stop it. You guys are great. I'm actually a rectangle is what I am, not a square.
That is true. Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay.
But other than that, I'm delightful.
Okay. We were talking pre-show about your title, and I promptly forgot it because it was so long. Director of Academic Computing and
Online learning.
Good job. Yes, that would be me.
Sally and I work that way. Yeah, we kind of have a hive mind. She finishes my sentences. Yes. So, and that's up on the hill at Martin Luther College. You've been there, what now? 3-4 years?
5 years?
5 years?
Wowzer.
Look at that.
I think 5 years.
Dispensing knowledge for 5 years. It's right on her business card now.
Or building Legos, take your pick.
Okay. Thanks for joining us, Rachel. Appreciate that.
I remember you from back in the day when you were in the first grade classroom in the Milwaukee area, and we interviewed you on WELSTech.
Sure did.
We did. That's right. And Jason Schmidt. Jason, how are you?
Hey, doing great, Martin. It's good to be back again. I always look forward to these opportunities to chat with you guys. It's like, it's so much fun. I appreciate the fact that you keep inviting me back.
Yep. Came right out of the box, unmuted and everything. So thank you for that.
I live on Zoom these days, so
you got that down. Got the keyboard. Got the keyboard shortcuts memorized. Yes.
Yep.
Jason's title, for those that are keeping score, Executive Director of Wisconsin Virtual School. Ooh. So maybe a title that didn't exist a few years ago when you started with us on WELSTech, but now virtual schools are everywhere.
Yeah, well, and actually, this is our 22nd year of operation. So we've been around almost as long as Rachel has.
How about that?
Poor Rachel.
Thanks.
And we have a special guest to talk about our educational technology topic of the day, and that is Director of, I don't know, did you finally change the name up there on the hill, Bob? Bob Martins, Director of Network Services or Information Technology, or what's the flavor of the day?
I think technically my title is Director of Information Technology, and the department that I oversee currently is Network Services, but we are contemplating and working toward a renaming or a rebranding, if you want to sound fancier, We've kind of settled on information technology services, or IT services for short,
Okay.
or as one of our friends here on top of the hill calls us, it's. So we're pretty neutral at that point, is what it comes down to.
Okay. Very
Um,
good.
But
Appreciate
yeah,
you. Appreciate you
pleasure to be
coming
here.
on. This is not the first time he has frequented the WELSTech doors. It was actually quite a while ago, maybe a couple times. I don't remember at this point. So
The one I remember distinctly would have been with, I think I was with your son, if I'm not
yeah, it was an
mistaken.
Apple conversation, must have been.
Apple-centric
because you
conversation,
are
yeah.
a former genius.
Yes, I definitely relinquished that title long ago.
Okay.
And if you ask any of my children, they would also agree.
Yeah, you get dumber as they get older. Yeah,
Absolutely. I hope that comes back around, but we'll see. I'm not very hopeful on
it
that.
does. Yeah, you just have to be patient. Yes. Sally, what are we going to talk about with these fine people?
Well, these fine people make up our EdTech featured show. We do this mostly during the school year and on an every other month cycle. And this school year, that equated to 5 shows. So we put on our thinking caps, got real serious about this, and we came up with a theme, and it is The Incredibles of EdTech. So we're patterning it after the Pixar favorites, The Incredibles family. We did a show featuring Mr. Incredible, and that was kind of on EdTech things that are strong and foundational and durable. And we talked about pick rats in that show. Rachel schooled us on a really cool way of evaluating and developing lessons to meet all the learner skills. And Rachel, you can correct everything I just said if that didn't capture it well.
Sounds good.
All right. Show number 2 in the series was featuring Mrs. Incredible, and we were looking for tools that were flexible and do it all for us in the ed tech space. We called that one button dissertation because Rachel was looking for an easy way to get that dissertation finished. And some of the tools we talked about were Google Slides, Trello, Screencast-O-Matic, and Bitly on that show. So if you're keeping score, we're up to show number 3 in this series, and the third person in the Incredibles family is the oldest daughter, Violet, who has that invisibility superpower. And we thought about ed tech and what's invisible to us but super powerful, and that was along the lines of infrastructure. Dun ta ta, that's why Bob's here, because he is really good at talking about infrastructure. Bob, it seems like you maybe just taught a class related to this. Is that true?
Yeah, I had the privilege this past summer of teaching our first go around of a course called School Technology Infrastructure for our graduate program, aimed primarily at tech directors for the Synod. So we were really fortunate to have a group of, I think it was 5 or 6 men and women who were a part of that cohort that we had coming through. We had really good discussions and stuff. So it was a lot of fun. Have a lot of notes to improve things for the next go around, but that is a continual process when you're teaching anything. But it was a lot of fun to work with those ministry professionals, people who are out there actually in schools. That's the primary audience we had at the time, and work with them through that. So it was a lot of fun.
Bob, we should probably define what we mean by infrastructure. I think we throw that word around a lot,
Yep.
but maybe give us a working definition we can springboard off of.
I'm glad you went with working definition and not good, because I would never ever try and equate to what.
Well,
I'm
you're no
saying.
longer a genius, so you can get the best you can. So,
and now I'm actually in administration, so I've lost even more credibility.
That's right. You have no cred
things,
whatsoever.
So
yeah.
I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore.
You're just taking up air there.
That's right. Oh, Rachel knows exactly how much air I take up most of the time. However, at least when I think about infrastructure, when we talk about it here at Martin Luther College, a lot of times we're talking about those systems, those physical components, those items, and even those concepts that are kind of sitting in the background and that everything else is layered on top of in a lot of ways. And so the canonical one that people think about is the network. And the network can take a lot of different directions. It can be the wired network that some of us are more used to, and maybe we have an affinity for it because we like to have cables plugged into walls when we're going to be accessing our digital information in certain ways. But it also has to do with wireless networks that are out there, and wireless networks encompass a whole category of different things, depending on what kind of devices you're utilizing and what standards they fall on top of. However, infrastructure also goes down to even such components as how much power you have available, what sort of physical security you have in certain parts of the building, depending on what your information security posture may need to be. And it also includes some things that kind of go unseen at the same time. The physical layout of the space can be considered infrastructure because you don't think about it, but it can very much affect how you're able to utilize a space and how you're able to utilize technology. So it kind of has a very expansive definition. You can expand it out to be almost meaningless to an extent. However, I think for a lot of the things that we talk about, we're talking about foundational components around the access of information, primarily networks, wireless, wired, and then all the things that go along with that, which includes information security sometimes and often, but also physical security and those sorts of things. I don't know if Jason, Rachel, or anyone else wants to kind of hop in if I forgot a key part there that you're kind of thinking about.
Well, I was really thinking about it as you were talking, Bob, and I got nothing. No, I think that's pretty wide net that you cast, and especially to incorporate like some of those, like the way I always explained it is it's the hidden stuff, right? It's the behind the scenes. It's what enables all of the other things that are going on, and the different types of networks and everything like that's nice job.
Yep. Yeah, and
we'll double your pay next time. Sorry, Martin, I just blew your budget.
Yeah, right.
0 times 2 is still 0 when it comes down to it. I know how that works.
I think from my vantage point, and Rachel, you can chime in too, because you were the one considering, I'm sure, whether this was part of the graduate curriculum. Must have been some rationale, which I could probably predict, but it's a scary area when I look at our schools, because it's so important and it's so easy to get wrong or to do kind of a half whatever job at, just kind of cobble things together. And that can be dangerous from a privacy, from a security perspective, from just a productivity perspective. Things can go real sideways on a campus if this isn't done right. Rachel, kind of what was the thinking as you're putting this stuff together? How long has this been in the curriculum?
So we did a kind of a rewrite of the EdTech graduate program about 2 years ago now, and so we're working through our first cohort, especially of the tech director emphasis. And the way at least I kind of looked at the tech director program was, what things would I need to know in order to be okay with being called a tech director at a school? And I took that approach because I think I have a pretty good working knowledge of like how to use Google and all those ed tech type tools. I can probably install a printer, that kind of basic stuff. I can set up a home Wi-Fi system pretty easily. But you take me to a school and you start talking about access points and firewalls. I do at least know that a firewall isn't a physical wall. It's like a box somewhere. But
Depends.
Those are the kind of things that you need to have a better grasp on. At the very least, you need an awareness of, so that you can ask the right questions, make sure the right things are covered. And a big piece of that is infrastructure, and that's where Bob's course really comes in. I actually want to take it one of these days so that I can actually maybe feel like I could be a tech director. Not that I would, maybe want to do that, but
no, you're not going
nice
anywhere.
to have the knowledge. Whatever.
That's a great point, Rachel. And I'll ask Bob this: is it reasonable to ask somebody to do all that stuff, to do all the ed tech stuff, to do all the network stuff, to write the policies, to be up on security? I mean, it just doesn't seem like that can fit in one person's bucket.
Right. And I think that's the thing that an individual who's being asked to take on that role in some way would need to struggle with their school board or an advisory committee that they have around technology, is that they're, like I said, it's very expansive. And this is just the infrastructure side. And we don't even get to the educational, like what's more traditionally the educational technology piece, where you're bringing in software and other systems specifically for the teaching side, and the sort of training and shepherding that's needed for the faculty at that end. That's a whole different ball of wax. But even on the infrastructure side, and before I moved into this role, I was the system and network admin for MLC for, oh boy, 8 years. I think it sounds about right. And before that, I had helped out in a various number of ways. And even then, my full-time job was to work with network and systems, and I still needed to bring in help from time to time. I still needed to make sure that I was able to stay abreast of things. And so you need to kind of gather together help in various ways. And that can be from local volunteers. I know that's a thing that happens, I think, very often throughout the Synod. We have just an amazing number of people who have a heart to volunteer in that way, but also to work and try and find resources, local vendors. I know on the information security side, the hope is that the Synod can be kind of a clearinghouse, or at least a resource for information security policies and procedures and guidance in that sense. So that's a place too where we're able to kind of band together in various ways, because doing it all yourself is a really quick way to burn out really fast. And that doesn't even account for the fact that a lot of these individuals are called to teach first and foremost, and then to do this stuff on the side.
And not do any of it, to do it well. Right.
Right. And that just those are challenges that need to be overcome. And so that's where you do have to work with, within the governance structures that you have available, and really foster those relationships so that you can make the needs known, whether that is vendor help, a service provider in the area to help with certain things. I know that Mr. Kirk Showland out at Minnesota Valley Lutheran High School here outside of New Ulm, can't wait till Highway 14 is open. He works with Nuvero, who is our local internet service provider here in town. They're a communications company, as kind of an MSP. So they do some of the work, but he's got a working knowledge of how everything's put together. He can help troubleshoot the minor things and then provide information to those techs who are coming out to facilitate a quick turnaround. And I think that gets to what Rachel was saying before. A lot of times it's not that you have to know everything, because you can't. Everything's changing and moving so quickly. But if you have a foundational knowledge about the concepts and how things work together in concert, that gives you a leg up when something goes sideways, and it will, to be able to get up to speed quickly and get valuable information to the people that are helping you then with troubleshooting, or with kind of trying to navigate what might have happened. And that puts some people under a lot of pressure, because if they come into a new situation and have to try and make it all up, within the first weeks or months or the first semester that they're in a school, you're going to learn a whole lot when everything goes sideways. That's a great time to kind of start piecing things together in your own mind. And at least what I've found is people are very willing to give you the time and the slack necessary if they know what you're doing. It's like, where are your struggles and what you need help with? So a lot of times it's, again, fostering relationships, advocating for your needs and for the needs of the school. Those are kind of some of the initial things that need to happen in those situations.
Yeah, a few of the things that you were just saying there, Bob, that kind of just gets me thinking a little bit and reflecting on my past experience. I was as a former public school technology director, like I knew enough to be dangerous. But I was not like, if I had some real deep networking stuff, I had people to call. So that's not like, I think there's sometimes we may sometimes have a mindset that we need to be able to do it all and be able to, and it's just it's not possible to have all of that skill and knowledge reside in one person. So, that reaching out to resources, whether that's vendors that you work with, or, every state has education agencies that, that serve as supports for schools. They're all available, sometimes at low and no cost, depending on where you live, to be able to provide those additional supports. So the importance of like networking, not the physical cables, but like networking with people that have,
Yes.
the people networking. That's a really important thing.
And to piggyback off of that, and to do that locally, it's really tempting to kind of try and only foster your networks that you have had at your old locale or that you had in college, or those, and the virtual space allows us to utilize those to a great extent we couldn't in the past. But the difficulty comes in when you need help in your location and in your locale. That's where you need to be keenly aware that infrastructure still is a local physical thing. It's not always virtual, and it can't be to a certain extent, because you'll always have a device there accessing materials that are somewhere else, and that those bits have to actually, like, electrically, like the light in the fiber has to physically pass through. Like, there are things that can't be avoided at that point, and that's where the physical community that you have around you, finding out who those key people are in your area, networking in the relationship building sense, those are things that are going to save you a lot of time and a lot of frustration well before you actually are going to need to call on them. And they might save you from ever having an issue, because they know kind of what the space looks like in your area. And, New Ulm's a small community. We have very few options in a lot of these cases when it comes to some of these things. And so for us, it's relatively simple. We have only the two people we can talk to for ISP connections. But if you're in a metro area for the first time, how many different ISPs, how many different ways of connecting to those ISPs, how many different programs are there within your county or within your school district or within your state are there for paying for this? The people who are there, they're going to know those things more so than your college roommate who's halfway across the country in an entirely different context. They might have ideas, but the people who are local, they're probably going to have something that's more applicable to you right now. And so you kind of need both in that instance.
I'm going to interject just one quick comment, and that is, we haven't really talked about documentation or, actually passing this knowledge along to other people, having a group of people in your school/church setting that know and understand even who to call or where the wiring closet is and what the very most important button in that closet is and that kind of thing. I have a pin in front of me. It says, "Be kind to your future self." It was a gift from Mr. Spriggs, a good reminder that, learning all this or developing these relationships or whatever are only go as far as that single person unless you're willing to actually also put in the time to document. So important.
I don't know, Sally. I had to put in all the effort to figure it out. They should have to do that.
That's a spirit.
Why help them?
Be kind. Be kind to your future self and let them deal with the problems.
Right.
Oh, so they don't call me when I leave. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, that's probably the more self-serving side of it, I think.
Before we leave this, regrettably have to leave this part of the conversation. Bob, what are some of the things that you feel were important enough to cover in the course that maybe our tech directors out there, or those people in charge of technology leadership, should be kind of paying attention to?
Sure. One of the overall things we do in the course is I have them actually going out and interviewing their own people within their ministry to get a good sense of what the expectations are for how the technology should work, because that's going to drive a lot around the decisions you're going to make for infrastructure. So and I'm just going to use hypotheticals here. If the expectation is every student on a Chromebook during 4 hours of the day, you're looking at a very different model for your infrastructure compared to the teacher as the primary, conduit for accessing digital components, digital resources, and those sorts of things. So those sorts of expectations are going to drive a lot, and you need to know what those expectations are, or else you can't right size your solution. You could put and part of it is just being, and this is a good Lutheran thing to say, especially being good stewards of the resources that our families and our churches and our supporters provide to us, almost requires for us to make sure that we're not building for, hypotheticals that'll never happen. There is something to be said about building for future ideas and future use cases, and you want to do that. But the danger for that is that the technology is moving quickly as well. So within the next 3, 4, 5 years, you're going to be coming back around and doing the same sort of thing again on the infrastructure side, just to keep up with what's happening, especially in the wireless space. That is continually churning around what sort of features you can have, and even now, what sort of security that's available for the devices. You want to be able to plan for the future, but you never want to get in the mindset that we're going to put this in and we're going to be doing it again in 10 years. So you're going to need to plan on a limited time horizon and then continually solicit feedback and come back. So that's the overall look. And then we do cover things like wireless networks. What's the newest standards? What would you do for access points? How do we handle high density environments? Classrooms are a really good use case for high density environments because you can have multiple tens of devices connecting. And if it's a high school or middle school level, you're going to have students themselves coming with devices that are also trying to connect. And that's a whole different realm. So that's part of our unearthing as well. And then to just ask them to think broadly about who are your stakeholders in these cases. Because they may be people that you're not even aware of. You might end up talking with a board member and find out there's a technology advisory committee, and this happened, that you never even knew existed. You'd never even met, no one had ever even talked to you. And they feel they have purview over what the plans are. And you feel you have purview over what the plans are. And that makes for interesting discussions, which is part of the fun. And then information security is a part of it too. So talking about what sorts of systems are there available to help you manage ingress and egress within your own location from an internet side. Firewalls are an obvious way to do that. But then we do get into topics more future looking ones like what does zero trust networking look like? What are the benefits and the downsides to that from a conceptual level? What does it mean that we don't trust anything? Because it's really, it can be a nice warm fuzzy to think that the things that we control are going to be secure, but you don't control the users. You can never control the users using those devices. And so that can get you down a path that isn't always the best. I know here at MLC, we've been moving over time toward treating everything as a hostile environment almost. So in the past, we treated the students who are on campus as a different class of user. And we just had to say, we're going to treat them like they're the public, basically. They're no different to us than the public at that point. And any sort of access we give needs to be mitigated through other means. And that's something to consider too, along with how do you handle people coming to the public. And this kind of all drives down to putting together some sort of plan or presentation that would ideally be given to the governing bodies and stakeholders with an idea of what needs to be improved, not just what, but why. And then to put together some sort of idea as far as how to implement that over the future. So that's kind of the overall picture of what we're doing during those very brief 8 to 10 weeks we have together.
That's great stuff. Yeah. Yeah. We've also found that very often the problem lies somewhere between the chair and the keyboard. Yeah. So
if you have a dog there or something like that, is definitely an issue. Like
all right, let's move on. Thank you, Bob, for sharing that insight. Hopefully you can hang around a little bit for the festivities of later on in the show here. Ministry Resource is a segment that we like to insert here in our regular lineup. And what have we got this week that we want to recommend to the good people?
I think we're going to hand it off to Jason, who has an amazing
Jason's
resource.
bringing it today. All right.
As his pick of the week.
I'm trying something new. No, so my ministry resource actually doubles as my pick this week. So we at our congregation, St. Paul in Green Bay, are starting an outreach initiative where we're training our members of our congregation to be more active and involved in our outreach as a congregation. So we're going to, starting in the fall, we're going to be starting to run some of these workshops where we train our people on how to be a member of the community who also is an outreach arm for the church. So how does that fit in with the member of the choir who is is participating in worship? How are they a member of the outreach team? How can we structure our Bible studies so that they're reaching out to the community and welcoming to visitors? Worship, like, it touches on every aspect of a congregational life, and really, trains people again to support those efforts. So it's not just a small team, but everyone, hence the name, Everyone Outreach. So this is a great resource that's put together by the Synod. We bring in, there is a fee that's involved with it, but I have a feeling that because it's super reasonable, so it's got to be subsidized by some Synod dollars. But we will host our workshops and then put people through the training, and then we'll see how the Spirit blesses the work that happens there. So really excited to start that process, and would be really just looking forward to seeing the kinds of results and the shift and the changes that happen in our congregation when we get this going. So everyoneoutreach.com, and then there's some resources in there for how to get started and have your facilitators come and help you out.
Very good. Good pick. I have not been through the whole program, but if you're at the leadership conference, and we're going to reference that later in our picks of the week. You got a little taste of that with Pastor Recker and
Kurt Nitz was the other presenter.
I'm sorry, I was just in a meeting with him this morning. I should have remembered. They do a nice job, and then they're also Kurt Nitz is also working with us on the Synod strategic plan, which is kind of culture based. So it's kind of a different take on evangelism. It's not kind of like, here's the God's Great Exchange, line up, you memorize this and you use it. It's pretty different than that. And I think people and congregations will really benefit from that. So nice pick. So let's go to those picks of the week, and Bob as our guest, and I'm assuming you came loaded here for a pick. What would you like to share?
I actually stole two, I'm going to admit. And I know one of them is near and dear to your heart, Martin, and very near to mine.
We have rules here.
And I'm gonna upend them. That's what I'm doing this time.
Yeah, you come on and you just feel like you can go rogue. Like, I mean,
well, you doubled up. You had the ministry resource, and then you're doubling it up. So I'm just taking your slot, is what I'm ended up doing at this point. So we're good to go.
Right.
Okay, fair. I will cede my time to you, Mr. Speaker.
So I'll be as quick as possible. The first one is just to put a plug for the 6 types of working genius. That is something that I have come to really value, and we utilize here in network services for some team stuff as well. Aaron Spike and I, we watched the webinar back when they first launched it, which was right during COVID, basically in 2020. And we've kind of watched them expand and grow on, and they just released a book. This comes from Patrick Lencioni, who has written a number of different books in the Table Group, including The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Death by Meeting, a lot of leadership books. And it's just a really, I think, succinct, and of course, like any of these things, it's a reductionist by nature, but a really succinct 6-step way of how groups of people get things done, and breaks it up into really 6 steps. And the model itself helps guide you through finding and has an assessment, your 2 what are called geniuses, things that energize you when you're working on it. 2 competencies, things you can do, you don't really get energized or de-energized. And then your frustrations, which are things that usually you're not as good at, and also de-energize you or sap you, and are key ways of burnout, and just helps to, like most things, put names to these things, and helps people talk about who they are and where they might be able to slot in various things when you're working with others. So the 6 types of working genius, they just released a book. They have an assessment you can purchase. You can see the site here that Sally is scrolling through right now. And they have a lot of resources as well for teams. And I know they have some things available also for churches and ministries to look at as well. So I've really enjoyed that. And my other pick is entirely self-serving. I use a MacBook Air with M2, and it is probably the most revolutionary laptop I've had since we switched to solid state devices. I am a huge Apple nerd, And the Apple Silicon has been just a delight to switch from the Intel base to the Apple Silicon. It fits right in my wheelhouse. So that is, like I said, that's an entirely self-serving one. The 6 types of working genius is maybe more applicable for more people, but the MacBook Air with M2 is probably my favorite computing device I've ever owned so far.
I have it. Very nice. Yeah, I can certainly vouch for both those, but the Working Genius is something that you said is near and dear to my heart. I am a certified trainer, for it. I felt strongly enough that felt this could benefit certainly our department, but the Synod in general. So if you want to know more, I'd be happy to talk about that. But it's different than, DISC and strength finders, because it applies really specifically to getting things done and work. It's not just a personality profile. It's kind of that, but it ultimately applies to how you relate to your work and how you relate to others as you do your work. So very good stuff. And the survey itself is actually very inexpensive. So nice pick. And Rachel, I always look forward to your picks. What do you got this week?
Well, I hope I don't disappoint, because mine's a little bit ridiculous, but also I really kind of love it. I saw on TikTok, of all places, this that you could get basically inline skate wheels for your office chair, and I kept like rolling over cords in my office, and then sometimes I scoot out this door right behind me to meet with the rest of the guys in what network services or IT or whatever we're calling ourselves. And it just wasn't always the smoothest ride. And so I put these on my Christmas list because I thought they looked kind of cool. And my dad got them for me because my dad's awesome. And they are just really wonderful. You really can glide on your chair. And they go over the cables without the cables getting like stuck up in there. Or Bob, stop laughing at me. It'll go over like, okay. I'm not laughing. I could be. It'll go over like, the tails of your backpack straps, how those get like caught up in the wheels. Like it goes right over them and it's all good. And it was a relatively inexpensive but wonderful upgrade to my office.
Works. I've got two sets of these, Rachel, one for my chair and one for my wife's chair at school. And I can vouch. I don't know if they're the exact same kind, but they look pretty similar, and they're easy to put on. They work great on carpet too. Sometimes it's a real pain to work on carpet. And they're not expensive either. So the ones you've got up there are like $25. It's worth every penny. So
it's
installing
just
them was really easy.
Go ahead.
All you have to do is you bring them to the office and you look at the guys up there and say, "Hey, can someone help me?" And then in like 5 minutes, they're on your chair. So
it's all about those local relationships, right?
That's right.
Awesome.
What keeps killing me is just the picture that keeps on scrolling across, like that Sally has up right now, the new dimension to office chair racing. Like you had me there. Like, and as we were talking about this before we got started, like that's immediately where my brain went. So that's fantastic. They advertise it that way. I love it.
The joy is in the journey. Very nice. All right, Sally, I think we're up to you.
Not that I can top office chair racing, but I did recently attend WELS National Conference on Lutheran Leadership, and I got an email yesterday pointing me to the conference materials website. And I thought this was definitely worth sharing because all these amazing things that were happening there, the presenters have shared resources around them. So definitely check it out. It's not the full gamut. I'm guessing they'll still be adding things as people share them with the conference committee, but lots of great stuff here. And as I'm scrolling, the first thing that struck me was, wow, this person has a really long list. Turns out it's Wendy Kuschel, WELSTech past
Alum.
interview, and she was talking all about congregational communications plans, and look at how much she brought to the table just in that one short sectional. And so if you're looking for more from Wendy, definitely check out the resources that she's sharing here. I could tell you about so many of these different ones that I attended, and I'm so excited to have the resources. But if you weren't able to attend, what a blessing that you can get their slide decks and things and read through what they presented on some of the topics that were there at the conference. So I will definitely have a link in the show notes to the resources from Lutheran Leadership Conference.
Very nice. And they're going to be releasing some videos out over time. They're not, it's not all at once. They're just kind of, not the fire hose approach, but they're going to do some of these as we, throughout the winter and spring. So keep an eye on this page for that stuff. So good stuff. All right. I think we're down to me, my pick, which has been a pick in the past. 3 years ago, I think I picked this, but this has kind of taken on a real important piece in my workflow, and that's a tool called Grammarly. When I started teaching in the graduate studies course at MLC, I could get a free account with Grammarly, which is awesome. Nice little perk. But basically, Grammarly is a plugin that you can add to Chrome, or there's also a app version that sits on your computer and just kind of looks for you to start typing stuff and evaluates and suggests grammar changes. It does spell checking, of course, but for me, my arch enemy in the language arts space is the comma, and it has solved that problem for me. Much to the joy and celebration of my language arts loving spouse. She taught 6th or 8th grade language arts for years, and I stopped throwing her the stuff I wrote because it wasn't
one of her working
builder.
geniuses.
She
didn't get joy, huh?
She didn't get joy from looking at my grammar. But this has certainly helped that. I get little reports every once in a while, how many thousands of words it's examined and how many times it has helped me out. It improved, it's not just grammar, but it improved clarity, and it actually gives you reports on themes in your writing. So is it encouraging style or aggressive or negative, or, it's just super helpful stuff, I think. And it does not really get in your way either. You can dismiss it and say, hey, don't pay attention to the, this application or whatever. But I'm doing as I'm teaching, I'm doing a lot more writing, and I'm doing blog posts and everything. And it is very, very helpful. And for the price for an educator, you can't beat it. There are other tools out there. I haven't done a full comparison on the different strengths and weaknesses of tools like this, but boy, I'm sold. I would not really write without this at this point. So I'm sure the more nuanced language arts specialists would probably cringe a little bit that I rely so heavily on it, but I think it's a good teacher too for me. So it's a good fit for me, maybe for you too.
I know as a part of my program at the University of the Cumberlands, the doctoral students get access to Grammarly Premium as well, and we're required to actually run our dissertations through it periodically. And so I've gotten very, very acquainted with Grammarly, and very acquainted with the passive voice.
Yes, that was a problem that I think I've conquered because of Grammarly. I love to write in the passive voice, apparently. So Grammarly says, here's how you can fix that. So good stuff. All right, let's move on to community news and feedback.
And this whole section is going to be dominated by our WELSTech Google group because it's been a happening place lately. There's lots of conversations happening out there. If you aren't a part of it, look for the link in the show notes and join. You will tap into hundreds of people that have experience with church and school technology and are willing to help you out. Almost always really great answers when people put questions out there. For instance, I'm going to kind of go from the bottom up. Recently, somebody asked about worship metrics, especially online worship metrics, I should say. How many people are watching your online worship, and what's the trick to knowing that for sure, or whatever, and who they are and things like that. And that's kind of a hard nut to crack. And I gave some examples from my congregation, but we'd love to hear from others. In our congregation, we have an online sign-up form, basically. We call it our connection card. It's like passing the friendship register that we do in church, but we do it on an online form, a Google form. And so I linked to an example of that and what our online worship page looks like and that kind of thing. And it takes a very dedicated, consistent message every time you're worshiping and online worshipers are joining you to remind them to sign the connection card, virtually and that kind of thing. But that's one way our church has addressed it. Definitely chime in if you have other ideas. Here's a question that doesn't have anybody responding yet. Someone's asking about HubSpot, which is an online tool for CRM type work. Customer management in our church, congregation, church management of who the people are, who the prospects are, what their contact information is, how many times you've had contact with them, those kind of things. I think HubSpot can do a whole lot more than that even. But this particular poster is just looking for anyone who's using it in the church space and pros and cons around that. So if you have experience with HubSpot or perhaps a different CRM that you're using, maybe this would be the conversation for you to chime in on. And then finally, a pretty lengthy discussion around biometric scanning to reduce time and money lost on student IDs. So this came from Peter Isles, who's the director of technology at WSCO, Wisconsin Lutheran High School in Milwaukee. And I thought it was a really interesting question, getting a system in place. If it's a student ID and readers and things, you think about all the effort around that, but you don't think about students losing those IDs and the cost and effort around keeping them up to date and things like that. So there were a lot of different people that chimed in, some tangent kind of questions around lunch programs and all kinds of things. And I think you'll benefit from the conversation here if you check it out. And then certainly if you have experience, just like everything else that's in the WELSTech Google group, you're welcome to join the conversation. And like I said, a link will be in the show notes.
Yeah, it is a closed group, so you need to request acceptance. So it's a pretty simple process. Email comes into me and I click OK, and then you're in. So it continues. That group continues to amaze me about the depth of the responses to what I would consider pretty deep questions sometimes. And we're really tapping in on the thought leaders that I would call them in the WELS technology space, who are willing to share their experiences, and super helpful flavor to that group. It's really cool. So take advantage of that. Sal, if people want to contribute to the show, how would they do that?
Well, that's a great question, Martin. I'm going to share my screen one last time and show you the WELSTech website. You can find it at welstech.wels.net. That's where you'll find postings of all the shows, all 699 of them, as soon as we get this one produced. And you can also find along the top right links to our different social media. So you can comment on Facebook or Twitter, or even on Pinterest. You can share things with us. There's all kinds of opportunities there. Our email is welstech@wels.net. And also on the show notes page, there's a blue tab on the right where you can leave us a voicemail. We'd love to hear from you and play your voicemail on the show, so you can, literally join our conversation. So please do reach out with your questions, with your ideas, with your successes, and maybe even some of your failures, because we'd love to learn from you.
Always makes it a better show when we've got that feedback. So And it always is a better show when we have the likes of Rachel and Jason and in this show, Bob. We really appreciate all you guys spending some time with us. We know you've got busy schedules, you got stuff to do. We appreciate what you do. But thanks for spending show 699 with us. Really appreciate it.
Oh, stop it, Martin. This is like the highlight of my month when I get to do
Is
this.
it?
So,
Okay.
hey, I look forward to this every time.
Very good.
It was a
Well,
pleasure.
we do. Thank you. Thank all of you for tuning in. Obviously, we wouldn't have a show without you. And we look forward to joining you for show 700, where we talk a little bit about, we'll do a little retrospective. We'll go back to show number 1, 2, 3, 4-ish and see what we were talking about back then, see if it's still relevant for today, and you might be surprised. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.